Welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sara.
And let's start things off on a positive note, shall we?
Sounds good.
Sara, has anything good happened this week?
My good thing is a little small and not specifically this week, I guess, but I went out and looked at my tomato plants, and for the first time this summer, for the first time this season, I saw little tomatoes on them. So that was exciting.
That is exciting.
I'm very happy.
I'm over here accidentally killing my strawberries, so
We've all been there.
I'm extra excited on your behalf.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Anything good happened for you lately?
My good thing is really just that I had a very, very nice day today, which is not super specific, but also true. So I'm gonna keep it.
Good days are nice. Nice days are good.
I didn't have a lot of work to do, which is good because I was frantically finishing our books for this evening. But I read outside in the sunshine, and I ordered Ethiopian food, which is not the same thing as Egyptian food, but it was the closest geographically that I could get that would deliver to my house. And it was delicious. So that was fun. Because, of course, we read A Master of Djinn by P Djèlí Clark, and we'll get into it later, but oh man, all of the descriptions of that place made me want to go to there. And the closest I could get was Ethiopian food delivered to my house.
I tweeted about this last night when I finished, but I think that out of everything that I've read this year, A Master of Djinn has made me want to travel the most.
Yes.
But we'll shelve that discussion for later. Have you read anything good lately besides podcast books?
Oh gosh. Confession. Subnautica Sub-Zero came out last weekend, so no. I've just been getting spooked by scary sea monsters.
I was going to say I don't know what that is, but I am inferring it's a video game.
It's a video game where you're on it. It's a survival game, and you're on an alien planet, and the first one is almost entirely underwater, and the second one is a little bit less, but Subnautica, it's an underwater survival game. And a lot of the game is just swimming around, and then suddenly a shape coalesces out of the darkness below you, and you're like, ah!
That sounds terrifying, and also I will never play that.
I love it. Anyway, that's all I've done, basically. Like a terrible person. I have a whole rant about sea monkeys that I won't get into, but I have a conspiracy theory, and I'm very concerned for them.
I kind of want you to get into it, but I do recognize that if you did, you would probably have to cut it.
More relevant, though, what are you drinking tonight?
Oh, do I not get to answer what I'm reading?
Oh, you do.
I completely skipped over the what are we drinking question. I just forgot about it.
That's fine. It is also more relevant, though. What, read anything good lately? Because I bet you'll actually have an answer for this.
I do have an answer. I'm not sure if it qualifies as good. I finally finished reading. I know I've mentioned in previous podcasts that I have been reading a lot of Leigh Bardugo books, and I finally finished reading Rule of Wolves, which is the final Grisha-verse book that is out at this point, although it very clearly leaves an opening for more books. And I just had such mixed feelings about everything in Rule of Wolves and the book that precedes it, King of Scars. I had reservations about the plot and the characters and the romance and how things were kind of shoehorned in. And it wasn't the book for me, I guess, or the books for me, which is a shame because I really, really liked Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, which are the two books that come before.
The duology.
The duology, yes.
Which is apparently a word that exists, and I hate it.
Yeah, so that's my answer to that question. I'm finally going back to Wheel of Time now. after this minor detour, this 6-book minor detour. 6 books, not counting the podcast books. So really, it's more like 10 books.
Yeah, it's been a little while, huh?
It's been a while. Yeah.
Well, when does that come out? You're trying to finish it before the show comes out, right?
Wheel of Time, yeah. I mean, I would like to finish Wheel of Time before the show comes out, not because they're going to be incorporating any material from book 12 in season 1.
Fair.
But just because I want, because I can. I mean, it's the same motivation that made me read all of the Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows books before I watched Shadow and Bone on Netflix. That like completionist, oh, you have to read the source material before you watch the show, which is ridiculous. I fully admit it's ridiculous, but I can't help myself.
But also, why not?
Well, when you're trying to read 4 books in 5 days on top of work, I think there's an argument for why not. But
that's why not. It's crazy.
Yes, I did it. I did do it.
It's only a little crazy.
But also it was crazy. Anyway, but the Wheel of Time show, as far as I know, does not have an air date yet, but it's probably going to be in November.
Oh, you have time.
I have time. Yeah.
You have time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not worried about it.
Also because the only one inflicting this schedule on yourself is you.
Yes, that too. Anyway, the question that I skipped, what are you drinking tonight?
Well, we had bourbon in the house, so I'm drinking Basil Hayden's, originally On the Rocks, but now it's just whatever the word for with a little bit of cold water in it is. There's probably a fancy term for it because everything for whiskey has a fancy term, but my ice melted is what I'm saying.
All I can think of is that when I'm drinking whiskey or when I was doing distillery tours, like you would add water to open up the whiskey.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah, it is a thing.
Because I like the water a little bit. It makes it taste better, honestly. I know, I'm a monster.
No, I mean I think it depends on the whiskey. There's some whiskey that I think works better with a little bit of water.
It makes me appreciate the flavor instead of just going, ooh, it burns.
Yes.
Which is really not a sipping beverage thing you want.
You can taste some of the flavor profile rather than just the alcohol.
There you go. How about yourself?
I'm drinking a white wine from a bottle this time and not from a can or a box.
Fancy.
Very fancy. I mean, it was only like a $10 bottle. It's not that fancy.
There was still glass involved. That counts.
There is still glass involved, yeah. So the first book that we're going to talk about tonight is A Master of Djinn, and I suggested that we read this book because I had read one Friday night, and I have family dinner with my parents on Friday night, which involves a significant amount of alcohol. But one Friday night, I read the prequel to it, A Dead Djinn in Cairo. And yes, I was very drunk. And yes, it was late and I was very tired. But I really enjoyed it. When I heard that there was a novel set in the same world coming out, I thought that we should add it to the calendar so I had an excuse to read it.
Now, you referred to A Dead Djinn in Cairo as the prequel to this book. I know that Clark also has a couple of other works published, short stories and things, that sound suspiciously like they're also in the same world. Can you speak to that at all?
I think, and I haven't read any of his other work yet, but he has another short story or novella. I'm not sure if there's like a word.
There technically is, but it's more of how it feels.
Yeah. Well, I haven't read it, so I can't speak to how it feels, but he has, we'll call it a short story. He has a short story called The Haunting of Tramcar 15 that is set in the same world, in the same setting, but doesn't involve the main character of both A Dead Djinn in Cairo and A Master of Djinn. He also has a novella out called Ring Shout, but that doesn't have anything to do with his Master of Djinn universe.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
I will say, at one point in this book, there is referenced events that happen on a tram car, and I was like, perhaps this is connected in some way.
There's actually a lot of references to the prequel short story. And I think, yes, there is the one reference to The Haunting of Tramcar 15. I haven't read it, so I don't know if there are more. But I was wondering, Lily, if you felt that you needed some of the backstory that is given in A Dead Djinn and Cairo to enjoy. Like, did you feel that you were coming into this book missing any information because it's not technically the first in the series?
Not in the least bit, no. I think these felt like characters that had really rich lives and that existed before this moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
But you would want that from a well-written novel.
Yes.
And a fully fleshed out world. So I did not get the feeling that I was missing out on anything.
Mm-hmm.
It was really just, I think the phrase tram car that literally made me think that's the title of something. Maybe there's a connection here.
I don't think that the character actually says tram car.
Yeah, they definitely do. Because I wouldn't have noticed it if they hadn't.
Hold on, I'm going to find the quote because I did mark it down. And no, it's CD shrugged, just gave some advice. There was a problem with the haunted. Oh, I guess they do say tram car later on.
Yeah,
I take it back.
Tram car.
Yeah.
The Haunting of Tramcar 15. That's pretty.
Yeah, no, I take it back. I was thinking specifically of what CD said. Mm-hmm. And then, but you're right. They do say tram car.
Yeah, they do come right out and say it. But even that, I think only because we had been discussing his other titles to possibly read them, I had them in my head pretty fresh, so I noticed it. Mm-hmm. It didn't feel like it was awkwardly shoehorned in there at all, even though it was almost exactly the title of the story.
Yeah.
Now, I am not usually a supporter. Okay, I'm still not a supporter of the idea that the first sentence of a novel makes or breaks the whole book, and you have to grip your characters right from the first word. That being said, this book starts with the extremely powerful name Archibald James Portendorf, which is just good. It's just good.
It's a good start. I mean, it's a good book. I really enjoyed it.
Right. And normally I wouldn't say that the first word sets up a book that much, if at all, but holy shit. It really just nails the tone of the time period and also that kind of, frankly, silliness that pops up in this book. Not when I expected it, but it felt very right every time that it did. Mm-hmm. It kept from being out of place by reminding me, by using names like Archibald Portendorf. I don't care if that's a real name. It's hilarious.
That also does, I mean, this book pokes fun at British colonialism, comments on British colonialism quite strongly. And I feel like Clark uses these ridiculous names to highlight just how ridiculous the British aristocracy is.
Oh, absolutely. It, like I said, it serves its purpose.
Yeah.
And it's not misplaced silliness. It is very pointed silliness. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't stop it from being silly.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it can be smart funny, but it's still funny.
It does double duty.
That's a very long way to say. The world building in this book is so masterfully done.
I loved all of the rich details that are just kind of dropped in. I don't want to say as afterthoughts, but like just snuck into the text without having any real purpose beyond creating ambiance. Like, yeah, so there's a line just casually dropped in. Then again, Abyssinian rulers also kept live lions wandering about their palaces, which reportedly had the ability to speak. So like just that kind of little detail I really loved, and I thought it added so much depth to the world.
It tells you so much about, well, not only are these people who keep exotic pets, but also a lion that speaks is not outside of the realm of believability.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason why it's unbelievable is because are they really that eccentric? Not. Is this really possible?
Before we actually go any further in our discussion of the book, I feel like we should give a short summary, a brief summary of what the book is for those listeners who haven't heard of A Master of Djinn or are not familiar with the series.
That's a good point. So far, all they've gotten is Portendorf and talking lions, which is not accurate.
I feel like we should give some context, like background information for our discussion, like setting and characters and things like that. So the story takes place in an alternate Cairo in 1912, and our main character, Fatma, works for the Ministry of Alchemy, Enchantments, and Supernatural Entities. And essentially, boiling a very good book down to one sentence, she's trying to solve a mystery.
I was going to say, oh, it's the magic FBI.
Yes, it's the magic Cairo FBI. Or Egyptian FBI, because it's not specific to Cairo. She just works for the Cairo branch.
Right. When I first read, it's not the back of the book, because the back of the book is all quotes, and we're not going to get into that right now. But the idea of an alternate history, I don't want to say I rolled my eyes a little bit, but I rolled my eyes just a little bit. But that's actually like the perfect way to describe this setting. What if, in the early 1800s, someone had released a bunch of magic and djinn into Egypt / the world?
Yeah.
Alternate history. But then it also does get into some of the, not the politics of World War I, of course, because the landscape of the world has changed quite a bit, but you do still see sort of the echoes of the world that is in the world that could have been. That's a very dramatic way of saying it, but I can't think of a better one, so I'm going to stick with it.
No, I don't have a better way of phrasing it.
No, just the world that could have been sounds a little bit too wistful. And I'm not saying, oh, just if only one thing had happened differently, we could have had djinn in the world. Like, no, that's not exactly what I mean. I thought so, as you mentioned, the main plot of this book is a murder mystery. And I thought the detective tropes, the detective story tropes in this book were very, very well done, and I quite enjoyed. But it also did not have a typical detective mystery plot line.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I mean, straight from the get-go, the prologue is the murder.
But you don't know who the murderer is, or you know who the murderer purports to be, but there is more to it than just that.
I actually did not catch on to that until the main character spelled it out for me very, very clearly.
I mean, to be fair, neither did I, but
that's still not typical. It's not a typical murder mystery in that you're trying to figure out who done it. You're trying to figure out what the fuck, which is still that's still different.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the detective mysteries that I've read, which are admittedly not many, and most of them by Andrew Cartmel, and those are obviously hard to compare to A Master of Djinn because they are set firmly in the real world, or mostly firmly in the real world.
Well, I'm talking purely about plot structure. And like I said, this is not a whodunit.
But it kind of is a whodunit.
The question may be, who has done this? But this is not a whodunit.
Okay.
We know how they did it, first of all.
We do know how they did it.
Is usually a huge portion of that.
Mm.
And just the fact that the reader knows more than the detective for the first portion of the book is extremely atypical.
Do we really know more than Fatma does?
Yes.
I don't feel like we know that much more than Fatma does.
How about we still do?
Okay, but like, what more do we know?
I can't say that. We're in the non-spoilery part.
I actually think that we know more than Fatma does in the latter half of the book than we do in the beginning.
Interesting. One of the detective story tropes that are familiar in this book is the brand new rookie partner. So Agent Fatma is the main character, and she's the only woman agent in Cairo. Not the only woman agent in the Supernatural Bureau. I'm not going to say the whole name every time. I'm not going to do it. But pretty early on, she gets assigned a partner, which she's very grumbly about because I go alone, and all sorts of other extremely stereotypical detective novel lines. But her spunky, wide-eyed, go-get-'em, first day on the job partner, Agent Hadia, is fantastic.
One of the things that I really like about the relationship is that they actually work through their issues fairly quickly. I mean, you don't have to, it's not like in some books where you have the whole novel is them bickering about whether or not the rookie should like actually be on the job, and they're just setting up that relationship for like further on down the series. You actually see them work through their issues, like work through Fatma's issues with having a partner, and work through Hadia saying, oh, actually, I can handle myself.
And Hadia, frankly, calling out Fatma for saying, you are dismissing me because I'm a woman, and like, do you not realize how hypocritical that is? I'm simultaneously glad that Clark addressed that dynamic, because I mean, I think that's a very real thing that some people face when they're put in minority positions like this. But he also resolved it early on, like you said. So it's not only did we not leave the book with this unresolved, but we didn't even have to deal with this unresolved issue during most of the action.
Yeah, it would have started to drag if you had to deal with that.
Absolutely.
But like you say, to your point, it's completely understandable that there are those sort of issues. So I'm glad that they were included. I'm just also glad that we didn't have to sit through an entire book of them.
Yeah, the characters were able to address this dynamic and grow from it without it being an albatross around their neck for the entire novel. In a sort of similar vein, Fatma and her love interest, Seedy, who, ding, 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 detective trope alert, is the best femme fatale I've ever seen. Oh, Seedy's fantastic.
I love Seedy.
But absolutely, especially with her introduction scene, such a femme fatale. Oh my God. But they argue. They have arguments, not even about trifling issues, like about some pretty significant relationship things that they work through. They have the argument, they resolve it, and then they move on, and they don't bring it up constantly throughout the book. They just handle it like adults.
It's really nice to see, I guess, what amounts to like a healthy relationship between adults in a book, and to see characters argue and then grow from that, and not have it be some sort of like life-changing argument, you know, that they can't move on from.
And I think this also speaks to how Fatma as a character is extremely deep and well-rounded. She is that headstrong maverick detective, but she's not stupid. Frankly. She has that dimensionality of being Stubborn, absolutely. People call her stubborn often, but she's not. I mean, stupid is the only word I can think of. There's got to be a better one.
Yeah, I mean, she's not stubborn to the point of detriment.
Yeah. It's not the only thing she does.
Yeah. It's not her defining character trait. Also, can I just say, she's a very sharp dresser and I want all of her suits.
Oh my God. I think I texted you that.
You did text it to me.
I need all of these. Every single one.
Yeah, those suits and her bowler hat and her cane, I'm in love.
Completely.
So Lily, why should you read this book?
Gosh, if you want to immerse yourself in an amazingly vivid, not just world, but physical location that feels both familiar and new at the exact same time, you should read this book.
If you like mysteries and non-Western centric fantasy novels, you should read this book. If you want to see just a lot of strong female relationships, both romantic and platonic, like, this is a great book for that.
If you want some badass djinn fights, this book has that too. I feel like we would be remiss to not include that.
I agree. There are some very badass djinn fights.
To avoid spoilers for A Master of Djinn, skip to 3610.
Should we talk about some of the isms in this book?
That sounds good to me. There are a lot of isms that are commented on.
I mean, the first one, just chronologically, in that it shows up in the very first paragraph, is the theme of racism. And especially with, well, I'm kind of mixing it in with colonialism, but aren't they already mixed in together?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's hard to extricate the one from the other.
Yeah. But they're very, well, I'm still talking about the prologue, but the very subtle way that you hear the disdain for the local population from the British secret society is just, well, not mind-blowing because it's not news, but
it's not news, but it's especially pointed because they are a secret society dedicated to the research and almost worship of a local magician. So it feels very hypocritical of them to be so dismissive of the people who live in the city around them.
So hypocritical. That was something I pointed out right away. And you see that especially blunt with how they're treating Mustafa, I think.
The manservant of
Is manservant the right phrase?
Yeah, he is called a manservant. Dalton's manservant, Mustafa.
And they're so rude to him just because of, who he is and where he's from, while at the same time obsessing over Al-Jahiz, who is this mysterious magician, like almost simultaneously. It's very stark.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, there's racism within the people of Cairo, too. It's not just the would-be colonizers.
Yeah, I mean, there's racism based on the color of your skin still, and there's also racism against, like, the djinn. There's racism everywhere.
But there was also what I used heavy quotation marks around familiar classism. just because this story clearly is using this alternate world to explore classism in our world. I mean, it's hard to not draw the parallels. So familiar with some heavy quotes.
Yeah, I mean, Al-Jahiz, or the person who is impersonating Al-Jahiz, the returned Al-Jahiz takes advantage of a lot of the class tension to create conflict in the city of Cairo. But it's not, I mean, it's understandable class tension. Like the people, like just because he is the villain of the story doesn't mean that the things that he's saying don't have basis in truth.
Well, I think the characters are all very clear about that too. It's not that he's lying, it's just that he's using it for his own gain.
Yeah, I mean, like that's like you say, that's quite evident in the text and in the characters,
but there is this weakness in the society that he can exploit to great effect, and it causes huge amounts of chaos.
I mean, he's very successful at it.
Yeah.
There's also a great quote on page 263 about respectability politics and the toll that trying to make yourself fit the mold of the predominant, culture society enacts. So Fatma is talking with a Djinn who is apparently, in truth, a half Djinn. And there are all these stereotypes of being half Djinn, that they're quick-tempered and untamed and prone to violence and things like that. And so this character is saying, I worked hard to counteract that bias. I became the most dignified of Djinn. I carried myself with grace so that none could cast aspersions on my lineage. All of that taken from me now, at last reduced to the half-civilized Deva prone to murderous rage. He released a weary sigh. It's a terrible thing, this politics of being perceived as respectable, to be forced to view your frailties through the eyes of others. A terrible thing.
I am probably just putting less elegantly what respectability politics already means, but that line or that dialogue reminded me quite a bit of that awful phrase, one of the good ones.
I
suspect that that's already encompassed by respectability politics, and I'm just not well read enough to know it.
But yeah, I mean, I thought that discussion was particularly poignant.
Absolutely. And so many of them are. Possibly because Agent Fatma is the main character and she is navigating these sort of sticky public relations situations. She's able to have conversations about perception that don't feel forced. So we're able to actually hear these characters talk about these things instead of just having to guess about them from what's on the page.
Yeah, it feels like we are able to have I almost want to say a discussion with the book about these issues rather than just inferring.
Well, absolutely. And because different characters are discussing it, the book does not necessarily, come down on one side or the other. It truly is just an exploration or a discussion of these topics, because we're able to see multiple sides from different characters.
There is a quote that I really, really liked because it is such a dig at West-centric scholarship. And Clark is a professor of history at a university, so I think he probably has a lot of experience with how the West centers itself in scholarship. But the quote is, Fatma is talking with Abigail, who is the daughter of the murdered English lord. And the quote is, Fatma glanced to the book, remembering its sensational content. It looked like utter nonsense. Most of these Orientalists thought their bad translations and wrong-headed takes might help them better understand the changes sweeping the world. It seemed reading from actual Eastern scholars was beneath them. I just had to laugh when I read that. I think it is both funny but also a very pointed commentary on racism.
I mentioned earlier that I really appreciated the planted payoff with Hadia's character. One thing that I did not get that payoff for were the boilerplate eunuchs, the automatons, the robots, if you will, the robot butlers that show up quite a bit. Except they're basically just set pieces. And there were a couple of sly comments about, Well, I heard some boilerplate eunuchs had gotten sentience just like once or twice, and I kept waiting for something to happen with them, and it never does, which makes me think maybe in one of the other works it does, like with the ghouls. But I was honestly a little disappointed that we didn't get anything from them at all.
Yeah, I am trying to think of, like I think I said at the beginning of this episode, I was fairly, I had consumed a lot of alcohol the night that I read the prequel. So my memory of that is fairly blurry, blurry and indistinct. But my thought regarding the automatons is that it might come up in like a follow-up novel.
It better. I
Yeah.
really feel like I was left hanging there.
I would be interested to see if it does play a part in a later book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it feels like there's something missing there, and that's so out of character for all of the other parts of this world
Mhm.
that it stands out,
Yeah.
frankly. So maybe we've just blown open what his next book is going to be about. If so, sorry.
I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
And we return after a short delay due to reading too many books at once to the journey to the center of the Discworld.
It's good to be back.
It is. I'm having so much fun rereading these books. Honestly, it's been a while.
It has been less time for me, but I'm enjoying reading them too. I will be happy when we are, because I had started a reread 6 months before we started the podcast. So we're still rereading, or we're still reading books that I had read quite recently, and I'll be happy when we get to where I was, but I think that's going to take a while.
Well, sorry and thanks.
The things I do for you, Lily. Not that this was really a hardship. I mean, reading Terry Pratchett, oh, the difficulty.
That's the secret. You keep your requests very easy, and then people don't realize they're doing you favors.
I mean, I did realize that I was doing you a favor.
Shh.
I'm doing you a favor with this whole podcast, really.
Anyway, this week, or today, if you are some of us, we read Mort by Terry Pratchett.
Which is book 4 in his Discworld series, published in 1987.
And it's the first book that centers around the character Death.
Yeah, death is, I mean, it's all about death and an exploration of what it means to be death. But I have to admit that as much as I enjoy the character of Death, this is not my favorite Terry Pratchett book, because I found most of the characters pretty unusually for Terry Pratchett. I found most of the characters pretty unsympathetic, I have to say.
Well, we're going to get into that a little bit more once we're talking with spoilers. But before then, as you said, this is an exploration of what it means to be Death, and we're accessing that through Death hiring an apprentice. Everything he does is so charming. He being Death. Sorry, I quite like this character. And also Death really likes cats. It's like, that's really all you need to know.
Death does really like cats. Death has some really good scenes. I think that we are still early enough in the series that Terry Pratchett is, as I've said for all of our discussions up until now, Terry Pratchett is still kind of consolidating his idea of what he wants from the characters and the wider world of Discworld.
I agree, but I do think this book we start to see some very concrete aspects of the setting that do now show up throughout the series as they are imagined in this book.
Yeah, I think this is really where you start to see that solidification, but there are a couple of things, or at least there's one thing that I noticed when reading this is he talks briefly about an order of monks called the Listeners, which parallel very closely to the history monks who show up in later books. They both have an abbot who reincarnates. They both have an abbey in the mountains. There is a member of the order named Lobsang in both of them. So you do still see, even though a lot more of this book is concretely Discworld in a way that the first 3 books weren't, you do still see some aspects that will morph into more recognizable bits of Discworld later on, in my opinion.
But in this book, we get some really iconic visuals. We see Death's home in a way that we recognize, because we do briefly visit that in The Light Fantastic, I think.
I think so, yeah.
One of the first 2, which are secretly just one book. And it is a completely different place than as we see it here. And as we see it here, I think is really how it, of course things grow and change, but this is the concept that sticks.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
And then of course we see Death operating from his side of things instead of just watching him appear from the other side.
And Death's character is much more stable than or consistent with what we expect from later books than it is in the first 3 books.
Completely. We see his, I'm going to overuse the word charming because I don't want to call him cute, and that's like the only thing I got. So but Death is sort of going through a midlife crisis in this book. He is trying to get a life, so to speak. And his attempts at doing that, at trying to mimic what humans find fun, I'll say it, is extremely adorable.
He does have, as I said, he does have a lot of really great, adorable scenes.
I also think the tone is really starting to shine in this book. There are a couple of excellent moments that aren't particularly important. They are just so Pratchett in their humor.
I guess I kind of agree, but I also think, I guess I kind of agree that he does have some moments that are very Pratchett-esque, but I think in general this book strikes me as being a lot less humorous than many of his books.
I'm not talking about the story, I'm talking about...
No, I don't mean the story either, I just mean the tone of the writing. Like, the humor used in the writing itself.
One of the things that Terry Pratchett does is he uses footnotes quite a bit, mostly entirely for jokes. And that's why they're footnoted. They don't have anything to do with the story, really. It's just silly asides. And here was an example that I felt was really in line with how he uses footnotes later. He stood up, reached behind him, and produced a flat reddish mass, which might have once been half a pizza. Asterisk. The first pizza was created on the disc by the Clatchian mystic Ron Revelation Joe Swahadi, who claimed to have been given the recipe in a dream by the creator of the Discworld himself, who had apparently added that it was what he had intended all along.
I mean, yes, that's very Pratchett.
And this is the first, he has footnotes in the earlier ones, but they aren't quite that off the wall. And so we're seeing it here in a way that we weren't before.
Yeah, I'm not exactly disagreeing with you. I just, it still doesn't really feel like the culmination of Pratchett.
Okay.
I mean, I don't have any, this is just my feelings. I don't have any hard evidence to back myself up.
I mean, writers are allowed to grow and get better. That doesn't mean their early work is not their work.
No, I'm not saying that it just, I don't know. This book really doesn't, I mean, it's good and I enjoy it, but honestly, I rank it pretty low in my scale of Pratchett.
I do too, but the prose is not why.
It's not the prose in specific, it's the feeling of the prose that I'm saying doesn't feel as much like Pratchett as I think you're saying it does.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the feeling of the prose is not the prose.
It's the feeling that it engenders in me. I don't know.
I think we're complaining about the same thing, which I do not consider prose. I think we're saying that the story and the characters are not great.
Maybe
And so even if the prose is funny, it's funny about a not great story.
Maybe, but also like I think that, and maybe I'm mistaken about this. It's quite possible I'm mistaken about this, but a lot of the humor just feels really dated to me in a way that Terry Pratchett humor doesn't, for the most part, doesn't feel like. Like he has things about, you know, Discman and things like that, or Walkman, like just things that are so clearly a product of the 80s that it doesn't feel as relevant and timely as his books often do, even if they were written a long time ago.
Interesting. I didn't have a problem with that, but I also tend to favor concrete references like that. So maybe that's just a personal taste.
It could be. Or it could be that I'm just letting my feelings about the plot seep into my feelings about everything else.
I kind of feel like that's what's happening. I'm going to be honest.
It's quite possible. I'm not going to argue that it's not.
Because I do think his prose is becoming extremely familiar in the humor, and I think maybe you didn't find it funny because you were not amused by what was happening.
That's possible.
Even if the wordplay was still there. It's hard to get swept away by it when you have these sort of thorns in your side.
Yeah.
So why should you read this book?
I think you should read this. Well, if you want an exploration of what it means to be the personification of death, or what it means to be death, then you should go read Reaper Man, and then you should come back and read this book.
I think that's kind of where we're going with this. In our discussion about where to start in Discworld, we generally say pick the topic that interests you and start from the beginning. That's the vague overview. We get a little bit more in depth, except for the death books, because of Mort.
Mm-hmm.
So I think after you've read the other death books, if you then want to come back and experience the inception and the beginning of all of that, then you come back and read Mort.
Yeah. Having just reread Mort, I feel good about our stance that we took in that discussion of where to start in Discworld. Because at that point, we had not reread Mort. It was not fresh in our heads.
We've been a little bit hard on this book, but before we transition into our also extremely hard on this book spoiler conversation, Sarah, why don't you leave us with a one of your favorite parts?
Okay, so there's a little bit of setup for this, but Mort goes to reap someone's soul and tries to warn him, and Death and he have a conversation afterwards. You tried to warn him, he said, removing Binky's nosebag. Yes, sir. Sorry. You cannot interfere with fate. Who are you to judge who should live and who should die? Death watched Mort's expression carefully. Only the gods are allowed to do that, he added. To tinker with the fate of even one individual could destroy the whole world. Do you understand? Mort nodded miserably. Are you going to send me home? He said. Death reached down and swung him up behind the saddle. Because you showed compassion? No. I might have done if you had shown pleasure. But you must learn the compassion proper to your trade. What's that? A sharp edge.
To avoid spoilers for Mort, skip to 1:06:32.
What the fuck is wrong with all of the female characters in this book, though? And by all of, I mean both. And saying both feels too strong, because it's really like 1 1/4.
Yeah, the one of my major problems with this book is just how one-dimensional the female characters are, especially when you compare them to Death and Mort, who both feel much more well-rounded.
Even Albert.
Even Albert, yeah.
Because you could say they're the main characters. Like that would be a fair argument. But Albert, who is Death's sort of manservant.
I mean, I think they're really more like grumpy
life partner.
Co-inhabitors. Yeah.
I mean, not romantic at all, but
grumpy roommate.
Yeah. I just feel so let down by the character of Isabel because she is Death's adopted daughter and she should be so cool.
Yeah.
But she sucks. And I'm not saying she sucks. I am saying the character is blah.
So for much of the book, she's just kind of this presence that resents Mort for being like in Death's domain. And she's described really problematically, like she's described as eating too much chocolate, and that's basically her one defining trait is that she hates Mort, or her two defining traits are that she hates Mort and that she likes chocolate.
I don't think it's problematic to like chocolate. I think it's problematic to have a character where the only fucking thing you know about them is that they're fat.
Well, no, but that's what I'm saying is it's problematic because that's the only thing, like, is she's overweight because she likes chocolate. Like that's how she's described.
Yeah. I just, it would be fine if she had literally anything else going on.
Yeah. And in a book that is how many pages? 241 pages, 243 pages. Isabel doesn't have like a defining moment until page 171.
Even then, she feels so much more like a plot device than a character. She is inconsistent. She is sort of just whatever is convenient for the story to move forward. And she doesn't have any like driving motivation. She just sucks.
Yeah. She is not a great character.
Especially when you consider Susan, who is not in this book at all, but comes up in later books as Death's granddaughter, and I love Susan.
Susan is Isabel's daughter.
Yeah, I guess we're in the spoiler section. So
we're in the spoiler section.
But I love Susan.
Susan has a lot more agency.
Yeah, she's an actual character and not just set dressing.
Yeah.
But okay, so we can all agree Isabel is the worst. It feels bad saying it just because she has so little. I mean, you said it. She has so little agency.
Yeah.
She swoops in at the end of the book as if we're suddenly supposed to care about her. I mean, and it's like, what is she doing? Why is she even there?
I do like the moment, the one moment in the book, basically, where she shows some character.
Where she punches Mort.
No, not that.
Oh, okay.
It's the scene on page 171 that I was talking about, where Death has gone missing and Mort and Albert have realized that there's an integral part of Death's job that Mort doesn't know how to do. And they're trying to figure out how to do it. And Mort and Albert are talking, and Mort says, "It's all Clatchian to me," said Mort. "I don't even know whether it should be read upside down or sideways." "Spiraling from the center outwards," sniffed Isabel from her seat in the corner. Their heads collided, there being Mort and Albert. Their heads collided as they both peered at the center of the page. They stared at her. She shrugged. "Father taught me how to read the node chart," she said, "when I used to do my sewing in here. He used to read bits out." "You can help?" said Mort. "No," said Isabel. She blew her nose. "What do you mean, no?" growled Albert. "This is too important for any flighty—" "I mean," said Isabel in razor tones, "that I can do them and you can help." And like, I liked that scene, even though, yes, it's basically just plot device because they need, like, Pratchett needs Isabel to do something. But I also did just like the image of her being like, "No, I'll do them and you can help."
That was good. I would have liked it better if I cared about her at all.
Which is fair.
Why? Just the fact that she waits until a dramatic moment to speak up instead of during the conversation of, "Uh-oh, we have to figure out how to read this. Do you know how to read it?" Like, why does she not say, "Oh, I do"? Like, why does she wait?
I mean, that's fair.
It's just completely manufactured for those punchlines.
It is manufactured for the scene, yeah.
And so that's not even her, really, which is my problem. Like, yes, that is a moment that is good for her, but even then, it is handled so clunky.
Yeah.
I want to like her because, like I said, I like Susan, and it feels kind of like you said, in that way, I think this is the half-baked version of later Discworld.
Proto-Susan.
Yeah, he wishes she was Susan, but she really isn't. He being Pratchett.
Yeah.
Now, literally the only other female character, I guess there's probably some side characters. But
there's the witch that Mort reaps, who is there for all
That's a weird way to say it.
I mean, he reaps her soul.
Yeah, that's better because there's more context. Just saying reap is like, you can't do that, Sara.
I mean, but that's basically what he does.
Okay, but phonetically, you can't do that.
I'm gonna keep it like that just to bug you.
Oh, okay.
No, okay. The witch that Mort, the witch whose soul Mort reaps. Is that better?
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
You're welcome. The witch whose soul Mort reaps shows up for like a page and a half, if that. No, I think she gets at least a page and a half.
I really liked her, and she gave me some warm and fuzzies. But she's still like a. In this book, we see several characters who Mort is the provides the service of Grim Reaper for, while Death is off having a midlife crisis, and she is just sort of one in a long stream of them, versus Isabel and Princess Holly, who are actually like characters that are throughout the story.
I'm not saying that she has any sort of plot similarity to or plot function to Princess Kelly and Isabel, just that she is, I think, literally the only other woman that I can recall showing up in this book.
I was giving us caveats in case someone is like, well, the innkeeper's wife shows up on page 58. Which, I mean, okay, maybe, but that doesn't count. I'm saying they don't count. And I'm kind of putting that witch in with the they don't count.
Yeah.
But I actually liked Princess Kelly a lot more than you did, which I think is interesting.
I wasn't a fan of Princess Kelly. I think as a character, she is a lot better than Isabel. Like she has a character.
Yeah. Because she has one.
Yeah. And she has a lot more agency, but I found her completely unsympathetic, and so I didn't like her.
I mean, okay, she had a character. She had a goal that we knew, and I think is fairly understandable and realistic, as in she's supposed to be dead, but she's alive and is so trying to make the best of it.
Which that I found quite reasonable and understandable, yes.
Yeah, I do agree with you that she's definitely the sort of out-of-touch royal figure, but I think because I was bouncing between Princess Kelly and Isabel, Princess Kelly was such a breath of fresh air that I was just rejoicing that here was this entire person who actually has an internal life that I can imagine. We don't see, but I can imagine.
She was the epitome of clueless, kind of thoughtlessly cruel, not intentionally so, just obliviously so, royal, that I couldn't get behind her.
You're not wrong. I have a quote to support your side of things. So this is after she's supposed to have died, but Mort saved her life instead. But the entire universe is acting as if she is dead, and so people are having a hard time interacting with her and seeing her, etc. She filched a couple of apples from a stall, making a mental note to have the chamberlain find out how much apples cost and send some money down to the stallholder. And when I read that, I just thought, how much could an apple cost, Michael? $10? Which, yes, out of touch. But she wanted to pay them back. She wasn't just stealing the apples.
No, and it's not that she's not well intentioned. It's just that how to describe it
She is also supposed to be like 16, right?
I can't find the quote. I think she's supposed to be pretty young, yeah.
Yeah, she's kind of a brat.
Yeah.
That's true. But honestly, at least she was a brat that was a person that had thoughts and feelings.
I mean, at least she was a person and not a cardboard cutout who just stood in, for whatever Pratchett needed. This is true.
And in that vein, Mort has a big old fat crush on her, which I think the story makes fun of enough that I was okay with, because he sees her once, and I mean, he's also like 16, so it's okay that they do dumb stuff.
The story is clearly playing on the love at first sight, hero gets the girl kind of trope, because Mort has, as you say, this big old crush on Kelly, and then at the very end it turns out that he's actually going to marry Isabel instead, and he and Kelly talked about it and decided that they weren't interested in each other. But it just doesn't work for me, possibly because I also find Mort kind of unsympathetic as well. Like, I don't like any of the characters involved.
Oh, I think through the lens of they are dumb children, it's fine. Like, it doesn't bother me that much. They make bad choices, but they'll grow out of it.
It's not the trope itself. Like, if I liked the characters more, I would like how that was handled. It's just that I don't like Mort as a character. I don't like Kelly as a character. I don't like Isabel as a character.
Interesting. I mean, I don't like the romance in this at all. That's not what I'm trying to say. I just think that the romance between Mort and Princess Kelly is the butt of so many jokes that I'm like, okay, this is supposed to be funny. But the fact that Mort and Isabel end up together means that we as readers are supposed to take it seriously, even though that comes completely out of left field.
Yeah, there's
no build up to that at all. No. And
there's a scene where they argue and insult each other,
which I would have been fine with if that wasn't the only interaction they have before Isabel decides she's in love with him. And then also, her way of being in love with him is helping him save Princess Kelly. And Death is like, why are you doing this? And she's like, because I'm in love with him. And it's like, what? Where did that come from? I do not like it one bit.
No, the romance is not great. The characters are not great. Death is great.
Death is great. Can we do a quick overview of the things Death does to try to have fun as a human?
I think we should.
So the very first thing he does is fishing. He makes his own fishing lures and goes fishing. And I mean, it's great. He catches a bunch of fish. He doesn't really get it. To be fair, I don't either. So I think his second attempt is, well, quote unquote dancing, which he accomplishes by joining a conga line.
He goes to a party at the Palace of Ankh-Morpork with all of the Ankh-Morpork dignitaries, and apparently they do conga lines all the time.
I don't think I've ever been in a conga line. That's not a real thing, is it?
I've been in a conga line.
Really?
Yeah. There's at the Tonga Room in San Francisco. Is that the name of it?
I think so.
Yeah, it is a tiki themed lounge at the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco, and they have a conga line, and this will show you just how cool I am.
They just have a conga line, like they hire people to have a perpetual conga line for guests to join at their leisure.
I don't think it's quite like that, but I went there for my 21st birthday with my parents because I am, as I said, the epitome of cool. And at one point, someone started a conga line, and it was my 21st birthday, so I joined in. And that's how I celebrated my 21st birthday.
Well, I take it back. There is one instance of a conga line in all of the entire world.
Yes.
I think his next attempt is drinking.
He does try to get drunk. He methodically drinks all of the horrible, unusual alcohol that one finds in a bar, like with dead snakes in it and things like that.
Well, he succeeds. He starts slurring his words, at least.
He does at the end get drunk.
And he does get a hangover.
But is that he allows himself to get drunk? I mean, he just decide that being drunk is no fun and then he magics it away?
I mean, yeah, but I don't see how that's not him getting drunk.
But there's an aspect of it's not
taking away his inhibitions because it's still his active choice to...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, he clearly doesn't like it. It doesn't do it for him.
It doesn't do it for him.
Because his very last thing is he wants to get a job, and he goes to an employment agency, and they place him as a short order cook, and he loves it. Inside the tiny, cramped kitchen, strataed with the grease of decades, Death spun and whirled, chopping, slicing, and flying. His skillet flashed through the fetid steam. He'd opened the door to the cool night air, and a dozen neighborhood cats had strolled in, attracted by the bowls of milk and meat, some of the inn's best if he'd known, that had been strategically placed around the floor. Occasionally, Death would pause in his work and scratch one of them behind the ears.
Now I just want a TV show where Death is a short order cook and he has to solve mysteries or reap souls or something like on his off time. I just think it would be a really fun genre show.
Or maybe just run the kitchen and he'd have to like hide the cats from the health inspectors and the hijinks, like more of a Bob's Burgers type of thing, but instead of the Bob family.
I mean, I think you could have both. Like you could have, there's the drama that's involved by having Death have to deal with these health and safety inspections, and then also having Death have to juggle somewhat, going out and doing his actual job.
I mean, I'd watch it. If there were cats in it, I'd watch it.
I mean, same.
This is kind of low-hanging fruit, but Fe-brew-ary is a pretty weird word.
Fe-brew-ary is a weird word. Every time I spell it, I literally say Fe-brew-ary.
Right, but if you're saying it, you say February.
Yeah.
No one says February.
No one says February. Although that would make for a really great pun, like a brewery-related pun, like where February becomes some sort of, you go to all your local breweries and it's Fe-brew-ary.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. It's like
it would
Oktoberfest, but February.
Yeah.
You might have to start February. Support your local brewery in February. February.
Fe-brew-ary.
It would at least justify that ridiculous word.
It would.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Twitter and Instagram at FictionFansPod, or you can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review on Apple Podcasts, and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated. Bye.
Bye.